To discuss the U.S. midterm elections, we're now being joined by political analyst Tom Gross from Tel Aviv. Welcome.
Right.
Biden has said on several occasions that democracy itself is at stake in elections today. Is that so?
Yes, Biden seems to be repeating this warning, this alarmist warning again and again, and so do other senior Democrats. Well, I don't think democracy is at stake. No, I think quite the opposite. We could have a very high turnout for a midterm, and indeed at the last general elections 2 years ago were record turnouts, both for Joe Biden and indeed Donald Trump got the highest number of votes ever given to a sitting president. So I don't only think it's wrong of Biden to keep on saying democracy itself is at stake. I think that it smacks of desperation because people actually want to hear about issues. And what people can realize is when they say democracy is at stake, he means we might lose, we, the Democratic Party, might lose. And I think voters are sick and tired of both parties being overly partisan, not accepting election results. Of course, the last time Donald Trump did not accept the election results, the general election before that, Hillary Clinton went on for years that she had won the popular vote and that Trump cheated and that the Russians had somehow interfered and swung the election for him in 2016. And even we go way back to when, George Bush and the hanging chads and things like this, I think that whatever else one thinks of this election, it is indeed an exercise in democracy, yes.
The Republicans are expected to do well today. What are the main issues?
I can't hear.
The Republicans are expected to do well today. What are the main issues?
Your sound technician is muting the question. I'm sorry. Can you repeat it?
The Republicans are expected to do well today. What are the main issues?
Yes. Well, as I just said, the Republicans are generally sticking to issues, mainly economics, cost of living, greatly increased crime in many American cities. The crime rate has shot up, and people say this is partly a result of defunding the police. If you remember a couple of years ago, some of the more radical Democrats called for defunding the police, and as a result, indeed, there are less police officers in many cities, and not surprisingly, crime has gone up. Then there's the question of migration. There has been enormous, I think 5.5 million illegal migrants have come across America's southern border. And a lot of people are unhappy with that for economic reasons or because of increased crime and or the changing nature of society. So there's migration, there's crime. Mainly, though, there's economics, and it doesn't look good, the American economy, inflation, and so on. So all of these issues are helping Republicans, which is why the Republicans are expected to do well today.
Now, former President Donald Trump has not left American politics as was expected. Are you foreseeing the return of Donald Trump in 2024, given the variety of changes that the American society has been through over the last few years?
Well, yes, Trump has consistently hinted or even virtually said he would stand again. He now says that he will make an announcement a week from today, next Tuesday, the 15th of November. And he said last night in a rally that it was very, very, very probable that he may stand. However, this being Trump, we can never quite know whether he means it or not. He could just be playing to get attention for himself. But presuming that he does stand, and presuming that Biden also wants to stand, I think that many Americans will find this a rather depressing situation to have a rerun of Trump v. Biden. Both of them are less than perfect candidates. Biden turns 80 this month, and he's a rather old 80. Do people really imagine if he wins a second term, he'll be in office in 6 years from now? I think that, Biden may have been a great president had he been elected, 10 or 20 years ago. But I'm afraid many people view him as a bit past it. As for Trump, in fact, had quite a good record in office in economic terms, in foreign policy. He got 4 peace agreements between Israel and Arab states. He got an agreement between Kosovo and Serbia. The economy fared quite well under Trump. But Trump's personality, his character, makes him, just not presidential, to put it mildly, and many thinks he's actually a danger and he's so unreliable. So there are many, many people that do not want either Trump or Biden, and hopefully there'll be younger candidates. The Republicans have several good younger candidates, Nikki Haley, DeSantis in Florida, Rubio, Cruz, others. The Democrats don't seem to have very many younger candidates. There is Gavin Newsom of California, the governor of California, who's being touted. And I think that not just America, but the rest of the world obviously watches American politics very closely, because America, for all its faults, is still the most important country among the democracies of the world. So those of us who do not want dictatorships like China or Russia to be too powerful, we want a healthy America, because America is the freest, most democratic country in the world. So we all watch who governs America very, very closely, because it affects all of us. And I think that many of us are hoping there will be 2 younger, fresher candidates. Traditionally, the general election, the presidential election campaign starts almost immediately after the midterms. So it starts pretty much tonight or tomorrow.
So these young candidates, you said, let's say if they are elected, do you believe they could refuse to certify their state's election results in a close election?
Sorry, there was noise here this time outside. Just repeat that, sorry.
These young candidates you mentioned, let's say if they are elected, do you believe they could refuse to certify their state's election results in a closed election?
I don't know the details, and I wouldn't want to speculate on it. People like DeSantis, who's running for governor of Florida again, it will be difficult for him to stand against Trump, because Trump is he has a lot of supporters, he has a lot of money, and he's a rough, tough campaigner. And some of the younger candidates, like DeSantis or indeed Newsom, may feel, why blow it now? They have time, they're both in their kind of mid-40s, they could bide their time and stand, in years ahead. So I don't know whether they'll stand. One trend I'd like to mention, having mentioned those 2 candidates, is DeSantis comes from quite a kind of working class, blue-collar background. His father, I think, was a kind of person who installed TV boxes, a kind of engineer, whereas the Democrat Newsom, his father, was a lawyer for the Getty Family Trust. It's one of the richest families in the world, the Getty family at the time. So what's actually switched here is that we have sort of increasingly working class blue collars, both politicians and supporters among Republicans, whereas the Democrats are increasingly becoming the party of the elites, the upper middle classes, and so on.
Now, many view today's midterms as the launch of the 2024 presidential elections. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, it's going to be a very tightly fought election, as are these midterms. In fact, I believe the amount of money spent on the midterms, it's something approaching, I think, $17 or $18 billion. In fact, no, it was 16.7 billion. That's double what was spent in 8 years ago in the 2014 midterms. And I think a lot of Americans must be wondering, with so many problems, financial problems, and with so much homelessness, for example, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans who are homeless, many of them sleeping on the streets of some of the wealthiest cities in the world, like San Francisco and New York and so on. They must be wondering, who is it that's spending tens of billions just on the midterms? So when it comes to the general election campaign, which will start any day now, I expect it will be very, very tightly fought, with a huge amounts of money spent. And one of the sad things that centrists such as myself feel is both parties have moved away from the center. Many Republican activists have moved to the right, and many Democratic activists have moved to the left. And there's a big center ground in between, which is, you know, exasperated with the rhetoric and the kind of you know, extremism, where we have two camps that don't speak to each other. They no longer watch a shared media like the past. A lot of them get their information on social media or within WhatsApp groups or friend groups, where they're just speaking to themselves. They are not listening to each other. And I think that this general election will be as ugly as ever. And if Trump and Biden turn out to be the candidates, I think it will be particularly ugly. And that, I don't think, is not good for democracy, and it's not good for public discourse and society either.
So to summarize the entire situation, what are your thoughts about these elections? Who are you expecting to win and why?
Well, the Republicans are definitely expected to take the House of Representatives, which is one half of the US Congress. They also want to take the Senate. The Senate's harder to call because there are several races that are very, very tight, and it's hard to know how they'll go. And some of them, like in Georgia, may end up having a recount or a second runoff election, as was the case last time with Georgia. And it's hard to predict, but it certainly seems that the Republicans will take the House, which means, again, that we have a divided power. The presidency will be in Democratic hands under Biden, and at least one, if not both houses of Congress, will be in the Republican hands. And this seems to happen almost every midterm, where people vote against the party of the president. Also happened last time under Obama, under Trump, and so on. So it means divided government, and it often means political stalemate. And, you know, with the gridlock and people not agreeing on so many issues, I think it's a pity, and it doesn't necessarily serve the American people.
Tom Groth, thank you for your analysis. Let's continue.